The humid Alabama night clung to the streets of Mobile like a thick blanket. Cicadas hummed in the trees lining the quiet neighborhood, their chorus interrupted only by the occasional car driving past. On the edge of a small residential block, Charlotte Charlie Rivers locked the door of her modest apartment and stepped into the warm evening. She was 21, working at a local hospital as a nurse's assistant and attending night classes to complete her degree in medical technology. Friends described her as caring, sharp-witted, and endlessly energetic, with a laughter that could fill a room and a presence that made everyone feel seen. On July 14, 1978, Charlotte had finished a late shift at the hospital. She had planned to stop by the small grocery store near her apartment before heading home. She wore a light summer dress and carried a small purse, humming softly as she walked down the street. A neighbor saw her passing by, smiling and nodding in greeting, unaware that this ordinary routine would soon be shattered. She vanished without a trace in the hours following that walk, leaving nothing but unanswered questions in her wake. By the next morning, when Charlotte failed to show up for work or respond to calls from her parents, concern quickly turned into alarm. Her mother, Evelyn Rivers, called the Mobile Police Department to report her missing. Detective Henry Whitaker, a seasoned officer with years of experience in the city's missing persons unit, was assigned to the case. From the outset, Whitaker sensed that something was wrong. Charlotte had always been punctual and careful. She was the type of person who planned her steps, who let friends and family know where she was. To vanish without a word was unlike her. The initial investigation was immediate but fraught with challenges. Officers canvassed the streets near Charlotte's last known location, asking neighbors if they had seen anything unusual. Some mentioned a dark-colored sedan parked near the grocery store for an extended period that night. Others recalled hearing muffled voices, though no one could be certain if it was related. Surveillance cameras were virtually non-existent in 1978, leaving investigators with only eyewitness accounts and circumstantial evidence. Charlotte's purse, left behind on a counter at the grocery store, provided little insight beyond confirming she had been there. As days turned into weeks, the investigation grew tense. Charlotte's co-workers at the hospital recounted her careful routines, the friends she spent time with after shifts, and the quiet sense of responsibility she carried. Yet, despite dozens of interviews and neighborhood searches, no definitive lead emerged. The police distributed flyers across Mobile and surrounding areas, showing Charlotte's smiling face, auburn hair pulled back in a loose braid, and green eyes that seemed to peer directly at anyone who saw her image. Local radio stations aired public appeals, urging anyone with information to come forward. But calls remained sparse and often inconclusive. The first month of the investigation was exhausting for everyone involved. Detective Whitaker reviewed every possible angle, retracing Charlotte's steps and talking to anyone who might have seen her that night. He interviewed the cashier at the grocery store, delivery drivers in the area, and even pedestrians who walked the streets around her apartment. One tip led to another, but most dissolved under scrutiny. The case, already complex, began to drift into the category of the unknown. Charlotte's family endured the uncertainty with quiet desperation. Evelyn and her husband, Thomas Rivers, held vigils on their porch, hoping to glimpse her returning figure from down the street. Each day without news weighed heavily, the silence a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the cruel indifference of the unknown. The local community rallied to help, forming search parties and walking the streets, calling Charlotte's name into the humid Alabama night, their voices echoing off brick walls and pavement. Months passed and the trail grew colder. Detective Whitaker continued his work, but recognized the limitations of the time. In 1978, forensic tools were basic. DNA analysis did not exist, and investigative technology was limited to fingerprinting, interviews, and physical evidence collection. Yet he refused to abandon Charlotte's case. Her disappearance had the hallmarks of something more than misadventure, and he sensed that persistence, combined with luck or a future breakthrough, might one day reveal the truth. In the early 1980s, The case was officially categorized as unsolved. The city of Mobile accepted that Charlotte Rivers was missing, her fate unknown, yet Whitaker never stopped thinking about her. He reviewed files during quiet nights, analyzing patterns, revisiting eyewitness accounts, and making notes for what he called future eyes, the possibility that advances in forensic science would one day reopen the case. Charlotte's friends and colleagues never forgot her. They spoke of her gentle humor, her commitment to patients at the hospital, and her ability to make anyone feel cared for. She had a way of lighting up a room, one former co-worker said decades later. Even when she was tired, she would smile and make sure you were okay. It's hard to imagine that someone could just take that away. The mid-2000s brought new hope. Mobile Police Department established a cold case review team, dedicated to revisiting long unsolved disappearances. Detective Rachel Monroe, known for her meticulous attention to detail and unwavering commitment, took up Charlotte's file. She approached it with a mix of respect for the decades of work already done and curiosity about what modern forensic science might reveal. Monroe and her team began by reviewing every detail recorded in 1978 witness statements, physical evidence collected, and timelines reconstructed by Whitaker. They identified elements that had been overlooked, including a partial fingerprint found on the counter of the grocery store, small fibers collected from a discarded soda can, and minor inconsistencies in witness recollections that might now be cross-referenced with modern databases. The team sent the preserved evidence to the Alabama State Crime Lab, where forensic specialist Dr. Jonathan Hayes, no relation to Charlotte, conducted advanced testing. DNA extraction techniques now possible could analyze even decades-old biological material. Fibers were analyzed for specific composition and origin. The lab reported back with startling results. The partial fingerprint from the store counter matched a man who had been living in Mobile in 1978, a man named Clarence Clay Whitfield, who had since moved to a neighboring state. Fibers from the soda can were consistent with carpeting found in Whitfield's old residence, creating a direct link to Charlotte's last known location. With this breakthrough, the cold case unit reconstructed a timeline of Whitfield's movements in July 1978. Records indicated that he had been near Charlotte's apartment and the grocery store on the evening she disappeared. Witnesses from the time were re-interviewed, and several recalled a man matching Whitfield's description loitering near the grocery store and asking peculiar questions about deliveries. Though small details individually seemed insignificant, together they formed a compelling chain of evidence. The investigators faced the challenge of locating Whitfield, who had lived quietly for decades. Records revealed he had returned to Mobile intermittently, but mostly resided in a rural community in Alabama. Surveillance, coordination with local authorities, and careful planning culminated in a search warrant and a covert operation to ensure his lawful apprehension. Whitfield was arrested without incident, his demeanor calm but guarded. He initially denied any involvement in Charlotte's disappearance, claiming he had no contact with her. As the investigation progressed, detectives found additional corroborating evidence in storage units and former residences linked to Whitfield. Items stored for decades contained traces of fibers, minor biological material, and personal effects that aligned with Charlotte's belongings. Each piece strengthened the case, allowing law enforcement to reconstruct the tragic events of that night with greater precision than ever before. Community reaction was immediate. Residents who had remembered Charlotte's disappearance decades earlier expressed relief and disbelief. Her family, friends, and former colleagues could finally hope for closure after 40 years of uncertainty. Local media highlighted the advances in forensic science that had made the breakthrough possible, emphasizing the persistence of law enforcement and the power of technology to solve long-forgotten cases. Charlotte's parents, Evelyn and Thomas Rivers, were overwhelmed by a mixture of grief, relief, and the long-awaited possibility of justice. They participated in interviews, spoke at community gatherings, and worked to honor Charlotte's memory. Her story became a rallying point for awareness about cold cases and the importance of preserving evidence, no matter how much time had passed. Detective Monroe reflected on the case, noting that the combination of traditional detective work, witness interviews, and modern forensic science had been critical. Every fiber, fingerprint, and recollection mattered. Patience and meticulous attention to detail allowed a story long silenced to finally be told. "Time doesn't erase the truth," she said. "It waits for the right methods, the right tools, and the dedication to uncover it." As investigators prepared for the next stages, formal charges and eventual trial, the city of Mobile began to process the significance of the breakthrough. Charlotte's story, once a tragic mystery, had now become an example of resilience, the enduring pursuit of justice, and the promise that no case is truly forgotten. Friends and former colleagues organized memorials and scholarship programs in her name, ensuring that her life and character would continue to inspire long after the pain of her loss. After Clarence Whitfield's arrest, the cold case unit knew that uncovering the full story of Charlotte Rivers' disappearance would require painstaking reconstruction. Time had passed and memories had faded. Yet each witness account, every fragment of physical evidence now held extraordinary significance. Detective Rachel Monroe and her team began meticulously retracing Whitfield's movements on that humid July night in 1978. They examined employment records, vehicle logs, and property ownership documents, mapping the locations Whitfield frequented, and reconstructing the environment in which Charlotte had vanished. Small details previously dismissed or overlooked began to form a clearer picture. Witnesses who had seen him near the grocery store recalled a man asking unusual questions about deliveries and observing people leaving the store. Monroe found patterns linking those behaviors to his later presence near Charlotte's apartment complex. The forensic lab had produced key evidence: fibers from a soda can at the grocery store, and partial fingerprints on the counter linked directly to Whitfield. Biological samples preserved from decades-old evidence were reanalyzed using advanced DNA extraction techniques. These tests, previously impossible in 1978, confirmed connections that were once only speculative. Dr. Jonathan Hayes explained that even degraded materials could yield viable profiles with modern technology, creating irrefutable links between Charlotte's last known location and Whitfield's presence. With these breakthroughs, investigators reconstructed a probable timeline. Charlotte had left the hospital after her late shift, walked to the nearby grocery store, and completed a quick purchase. Whitfield's vehicle was observed parked in the vicinity, his movements aligning with her path to the apartment. Each step, from the witness accounts to the physical evidence, reinforced the narrative that Charlotte had encountered Whitfield as she walked home, and that her disappearance was not random but a result of his deliberate actions. Detective Monroe and Detective David Lynn prepared to interrogate Whitfield, understanding that securing his cooperation required careful strategy. During initial questioning, he denied involvement, offering vague statements about his whereabouts that night. Monroe presented the DNA results, fiber matches, and corroborated witness accounts methodically, emphasizing the strength of the evidence. Hours passed as they alternated between presenting facts and allowing him to speak, probing for inconsistencies in his story. Eventually, Whitfield admitted to being near Charlotte's apartment and following her from the grocery store. He attempted to downplay the events, suggesting he had only observed her. Yet the details he provided inadvertently confirmed key elements of the reconstructed timeline. Investigators now had not only physical evidence but also corroborated statements from the suspect himself, forming a comprehensive chain connecting him to Charlotte's disappearance. Simultaneously, the cold case unit continued to examine Whitfield's old residences and storage units. Items retrieved included clothing, personal effects, and remnants of furniture. Fiber analysis linked several of these items to Charlotte's belongings, strengthening the case. These discoveries were crucial in demonstrating that the interactions between Whitfield and Charlotte had left tangible traces, even after more than 40 years. The investigation also involved revisiting original witnesses from 1978. Many had long forgotten minor details, but when prompted with precise questions and shown photographs, recollections became more vivid. A neighbor who had seen Whitfield's car parked near the grocery store recalled hearing muffled voices late at night, adding weight to the reconstructed timeline. Another witness remembered a figure loitering near Charlotte's building. Behavior now interpreted as predatory in the context of new findings. Monroe coordinated closely with the district attorney to prepare charges. They needed to ensure that the case could withstand scrutiny despite the decades-long delay. The evidence package was comprehensive. DNA and fiber matches, witness testimonies, timelines, and Whitfield's partial admissions. Each piece reinforced the others, creating a mosaic that detailed what had transpired on the night Charlotte vanished. Community response to the unfolding investigation was emotional and profound. Mobile residents who had remembered the case as a tragic mystery decades ago expressed relief and cautious hope. Charlotte's family, long enduring uncertainty, began to experience a sense of closure. Her parents worked closely with investigators, providing insight into her habits, routines, and social connections, helping to fill gaps and corroborate timelines. Local media coverage emphasized both the perseverance of law enforcement and the power of modern forensic science. Journalists reported on the careful analysis of decades-old evidence, highlighting the role of fiber and DNA testing in solving cold cases. Monroe emphasized the need for patience and meticulous work, noting that even minor details could become pivotal when considered in conjunction with scientific findings. As the investigation neared completion, every aspect of Whitfield's night in July 1978 was scrutinized. Surveillance footage from surrounding businesses, though limited and grainy, showed a dark vehicle parked near the grocery store. Witness statements confirmed the presence of a man consistent with Whitfield's appearance, observing and following Charlotte. Each piece, once isolated and seemingly insignificant, now converged to form a compelling narrative. The preparation for trial included organizing witness statements, forensic reports, and reconstructed timelines into a coherent story. Monroe worked with legal teams to ensure clarity, anticipating challenges from the defense regarding the age of the evidence and the reliability of decades-old recollections. Experts testified on the preservation and analysis of physical evidence, explaining how modern technology could authenticate materials from 1978. Community members, previously spectators to a decades-old mystery, became part of the narrative, contributing memories, photographs, and personal accounts. Their involvement helped humanize Charlotte beyond the forensic evidence, presenting her as a young woman with hopes, routines, and a vibrant personality, rather than only a victim. This human element was crucial in demonstrating the significance of the crime and the imperative of justice. Whitfield's interrogation continued with careful focus. Investigators highlighted contradictions in his story and presented him with forensic evidence that could not be disputed. Under sustained methodical questioning, he provided further admissions, revealing details about how he intercepted Charlotte as she walked home, the interactions that occurred, and the items left at his old residence that matched her belongings. Though he attempted to minimize culpability, the admissions, when combined with scientific evidence, left little room for doubt. The cold case unit also revisited geographic patterns, reconstructing Charlotte's probable route from the hospital to the grocery store, and then to her apartment. Mapping tools allowed investigators to visualize her steps and Whitfield's vehicle movements, confirming opportunities for the encounter that led to her disappearance. This spatial analysis was incorporated into the case, providing a visual narrative for both investigators and the jury. Preparation for prosecution involved rehearsing witness testimonies and ensuring that forensic experts could explain complex scientific findings in accessible language. Monroe emphasized clarity and precision, understanding that the jury needed to grasp both the timeline of events and the significance of each piece of evidence. The integration of decades-old witness recollections, preserved physical evidence, and modern forensic analysis formed a compelling and cohesive narrative. The community continued to honor Charlotte's memory throughout the investigation. Friends and family organized vigils, scholarship funds, and memorial events, ensuring that her life was celebrated even as the legal process unfolded. These acts of remembrance reinforced the human impact of the case, reminding everyone that the pursuit of justice was not only about evidence and prosecution, but about preserving the dignity and memory of the person who had been lost. By the time the trial approached, the reconstructed timeline of July 14, 1978, was complete. Investigators could present a step-by-step account of Charlotte's last known movements, the suspect's presence, and the interactions that led to her disappearance. The cold case unit's work transformed fragments of memory and physical evidence into a detailed, actionable narrative. The meticulous reinvestigation demonstrated how patience, persistence, and modern forensic tools could solve cases long considered dormant. Charlotte's case became a benchmark for other cold cases in Alabama, illustrating that no matter how much time had passed, thorough investigation and scientific advancements could bring answers and closure. The courthouse in Mobile was filled with quiet anticipation as Clarence Whitfield's trial began in late 2022. For Charlotte Rivers' family, the day was nearly 44 years in the making. Evelyn and Thomas Rivers sat in the front row, holding each other's hands, their faces lined with grief and relief. Friends and former colleagues of Charlotte filled the seats behind them, as did journalists and local residents who had followed the case for decades. The room held a tense energy, the weight of a long unsolved mystery pressing on everyone present. The prosecution began by painting a vivid portrait of Charlotte's life. She was described as a dedicated nurse's assistant, a student with ambitious goals, and a young woman whose energy and kindness left a mark on everyone she met. They recounted her ordinary evening on July 14, 1978, leaving the hospital after a late shift, stopping at the nearby grocery store, and walking home in the warm Alabama night. The narrative emphasized the ordinary, everyday nature of her routine, underscoring the abrupt, tragic interruption of her life. Detective Rachel Monroe and her team presented the evidence meticulously. They outlined the forensic breakthroughs, fibers from Whitfield's old residence matching Charlotte's belongings, partial fingerprints on the grocery store counter, and DNA extracted from preserved materials. Witnesses from 1978 testified, recounting sightings of a dark sedan and a man loitering near the store and apartment complex. Each detail, they explained, was corroborated by modern forensic analysis, creating a compelling chain of evidence. Whitfield's defense team challenged the age of the evidence and the reliability of decades-old memories. They suggested contamination, degradation, and the possibility of mistaken identification. However, the prosecution demonstrated how careful evidence preservation and contemporary testing had maintained accuracy. Experts explained how fiber analysis and DNA extraction had become sophisticated enough to handle even 40-year-old material, ensuring the reliability of the findings. The trial emphasized Charlotte's humanity. Friends and former colleagues testified about her compassion, humor, and commitment to helping others. Their memories gave the jury insight into who Charlotte was beyond the evidence, illustrating the profound loss caused by her disappearance. The prosecution also highlighted the meticulous work of the cold case unit, emphasizing the persistence, patience, and dedication required to uncover the truth after decades. Whitfield took the stand briefly, maintaining his denial but contradicting himself in key areas. Monroe's team presented the reconstructed timeline of July 14, 1978, demonstrating how his movements aligned with Charlotte's last known steps. Witness statements and physical evidence placed him at the grocery store and near her apartment at critical moments. Each contradiction in his story further strengthened the prosecution's case. Throughout the trial, the courtroom remained tense. Family members and friends held their breath as witness after witness recounted memories. Some vivid, others tentative. Every detail mattered, from the position of Whitfield's car to the timing of Charlotte's walk home. The integration of historical accounts with modern forensic analysis created a narrative both compelling and scientifically sound. The jury deliberated for 2 days, carefully weighing the evidence and testimony. When they returned, the foreperson's voice echoed in the room. We, the jury, find the defendant, Clarence Whitfield, guilty of first-degree murder and kidnapping. A mixture of relief, grief, and quiet triumph swept through the courtroom. Evelyn and Thomas Rivers held each other tightly, tears streaming down their faces. Friends and former colleagues of Charlotte stood together, some hugging, others silently acknowledging the decades-long wait that had finally led to accountability. Whitfield remained calm, expressionless, but the verdict ensured that justice, long delayed, had been served. The aftermath of the trial brought a complex wave of emotions. For Charlotte's family, the relief of knowing the truth was intertwined with the pain of loss. 44 years of uncertainty and unanswered questions could not be erased, but the conviction offered a sense of closure and recognition that Charlotte's life had mattered. Evelyn and Thomas began attending community events to advocate for the resolution of cold cases, sharing their story to emphasize the importance of perseverance and hope. The community of Mobile also reacted strongly. Residents who had remembered Charlotte's disappearance decades earlier expressed relief and gratitude toward law enforcement. Candlelight vigils were held, celebrating her life and commemorating the dedication of those who had refused to let the case remain unsolved. Local media highlighted the role of modern forensic science, the careful preservation of evidence, and the dedication of the cold case unit, emphasizing that even cases buried for decades could be resolved with diligence. Detective Monroe reflected on the significance of the case. She noted that the combination of witness recollections, forensic breakthroughs, and investigative persistence had been essential. Every fiber, every fingerprint, every small detail mattered, she said. Time doesn't erase the truth. It waits for someone willing to uncover it. Charlotte's story reminds us that justice can prevail, even after decades. The legal proceedings were only part of Charlotte's legacy. Friends and colleagues established scholarships in her name, supporting students in nursing, medical technology, and public health. Community projects and charitable initiatives honored her dedication to helping others, ensuring that her life would continue to inspire and benefit those who followed. Whitfield began serving his sentence in a maximum security facility. Appeals and motions for retrial were denied, as the overwhelming weight of evidence combined with his partial admissions left no reasonable doubt about his guilt. He lived the remainder of his life under the consequences of actions long ago, a stark reminder that even after decades, accountability can be achieved. Charlotte's parents became advocates for cold case reform. They spoke at conferences, participated in panels with law enforcement officials, and met with families of missing persons, offering encouragement and insight drawn from their own decades-long journey. Never stop hoping, Evelyn told an audience at one event. Time does not diminish the need for answers. The truth waits and it will come. The case also influenced law enforcement practices in Alabama. Protocols for preserving evidence, re-examining decades-old files, and collaborating with forensic experts were strengthened. Charlotte's case became a benchmark for the power of persistence, illustrating that even when initial investigations falter, advances in science and meticulous review could lead to justice. For the Mobile community, Charlotte's story became a symbol of resilience and hope. Vigils, memorial services, and scholarship events continued, reminding everyone that her life, though tragically cut short, had meaning and impact. Friends and neighbors shared stories of her kindness, intelligence, and humor, ensuring that her memory would endure beyond the courtroom and into the lives of those who remembered her most. As the years passed, Charlotte Rivers' disappearance and eventual resolution became a case study for investigators, students, and legal professionals. It demonstrated the importance of evidence preservation, the potential of modern forensic science, and the enduring significance of thorough patient investigation. Monroe and her team were recognized for their dedication, showing that even the oldest cold cases could be solved when combined with determination, skill, and compassion. Charlotte's family found a measure of peace. Though the years could not be reclaimed, knowing the truth allowed them to grieve fully and honor her memory authentically. They planted a tree in her name, a living symbol of her enduring presence, and continued to engage with the community to ensure that no other family would face decades of unanswered questions without hope. By 2024, the story of Charlotte Rivers had evolved from a painful mystery to an inspiring testament to the persistence of justice. Her name became synonymous with hope in cold case investigations, a reminder that time, though long, does not diminish the possibility of truth emerging. The city of Mobile recognized her life, her disappearance, and her eventual vindication as a turning point, both for the families of missing persons and for law enforcement professionals dedicated to solving long-forgotten cases. Though the summer nights in Mobile still carried their humid warmth and cicadas continued their relentless chorus, there was a sense of quiet closure in the streets where Charlotte once walked. Every fiber, every witness statement, every carefully preserved fragment had contributed to a story finally completed. Charlotte's voice, silenced for decades, had been heard at last, bringing her family, friends, and community the justice they had long awaited. Charlotte Rivers' story is a testament to endurance, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of truth. It reminds us that even in the darkest mysteries, with patience, skill, and compassion, justice can emerge. Time may stretch long, but the truth persists, and the lives of those lost continue to inspire those who remember them.